Okay, we're now recording.
Good evening, welcome. This is the first of two.
Wait, I haven't started it yet.
Right, good.
Okay, now the webinar has started.
Good evening, welcome. This is the first of two City Council candidate forums focused on climate change and related environmental concerns. I'm your moderator for the evening, Mark Hyam. This event is brought to you by 5 organizations: Citizens Climate Lobby of Columbia, Climate Leaders at Mizzou, Mid-Missouri Peaceworks, Osage Group Sierra Club, and Renew Missouri. Our goal in hosting forums like this is to shine a spotlight on what many of us see as the defining issue of the 21st century. Climate change represents an existential threat, one that could make virtually all other issues moot points. We believe it is essential, therefore, for voters to know where the candidates stand on this critical constellation of issues. Due to the pandemic, we are once again holding these forums online. Hopefully next year we'll be back in in-person forums as we've done for several years prior. The virtual forums are on Zoom, as well as being live streamed via the Sierra Club Osage Group's Facebook page and aired live on 89.5 KOPN Columbia, our community radio station. Before we start, I'd like to thank the candidates, of course, for participating, as well as the good folks who've made this event possible. This includes Erica Ascani, who's our candidate liaison, Kayla Misera, who is our timekeeper, Carolyn Oprin, our technology coordinator, Janice Smar, Jan Dye, and Carolyn Oprin, our question readers, and Laura Wacker and Margot McMillan, who are coordinating the live event via broadcast on KOPN. All 9 candidates who are running for City Council this year were invited to participate, and we organizers attempted to make this as easy as possible. We provided the questions in advance and offered, if the forum time did not work for any of our candidates, to either have the candidates designate a surrogate or submit their answers in writing in advance so one of our volunteers could read their answers. 8 of the 9 candidates accepted our invitation. 4 of the 5 mayoral candidates who are here tonight: David Seaman, Barbara Buffalo, Tanya Heath, and Maria Orapalo. They're all with us this evening. Randy Minshew has declined to participate. We'll be rotating the order of responses. Responses will be timed, and candidates who go significantly over the allotted times will be muted. I will remind you that next Tuesday, March 1st at 7 p.m., we'll be joined by both 3rd Ward candidates, Carl Scala and Roy Lovelady, as well as both 4th Ward candidates, Erica Pfefferman and Nick Foster. The same outlets that are providing tonight's event will have Tuesday's forum available as well. Right now, I'll turn this over to Jan Dye to ask question number 1.
Hello. This first question, after I'm done reading it, will go in the following order for the answers. David Seaman will go first, then Barbara Buffalo, then Tanya Heath, and then Maria Orapalo. I hope I'm saying that right. Anyway, here's the first question. The City Council adopted the Climate Action and Adaptation Plan, also called CAAP, in June 2019 as a response to the climate crisis. Are you familiar with the CAAP, and do you generally support implementation? And the first person to answer would be David Seaman.
Wait, Jan, I'm sorry that you got the wrong list. My fault. I sent out accidentally a different questionnaire. So let me read that.
Oh.
If you could look in your email, I sent a second one with the correct question. So let me read this while she's doing
I'm
that.
sorry. I guess I've got the wrong one here.
It is my fault. So number 1, there is a consensus among scientists worldwide that global warming must be limited to 1.5 degrees Celsius. To do this, humanity must dramatically reduce greenhouse gas pollution by 2030. What changes have you made in your own life to reduce carbon emissions? The time for this answer is 1.5 minutes, and David Seaman, you do go first.
Thank you. So the climate crisis is here. It's urgent, and it's happening to and through all of us. My family actually just built a new house. We moved in October. All of our appliances are high efficiency, Energy Star rated to increase energy savings. I tend to keep our thermostat at about 67 degrees in the winter, a little bit above 76 in the summer, which is not the most popular thing in my house, but that's what we're doing right now. We have large windows that allow passive solar heating. We do that, what everybody did in the South before air conditioning, opened up windows on breezy summer days, letting cool air on those summer days. All of these choices, though, are shaped by public policy, from EPA ratings, federal energy subsidies, to utility rates in the municipal solid waste system. And I doubt, because climate change is collective and political. Many people in Columbia can't afford a $20,000 home and solar installation. They can't afford a $40,000 Tesla. They don't live in neighborhoods or work shifts that allow them to take the bus to work. They're worrying about feeding their kids when the food bank opens on Saturday. They think about dollars and cents in their checking accounts. So to meaningfully reduce carbon emissions, we have to make a policy for everyone, not expect people to make unsupported sacrifices, or have them believe climate action is a luxury purchase for upper middle class folks. At the stop sign.
Okay, Barbara, you're next.
Yes, thank you, Carolyn. Yeah, so according to the current science, we have 406 weeks left to solve the climate crisis and cut our global CO2 emissions by half to keep our climate to 1.5 degrees. And so while we have the need for public policy and federal policy and local and state policy, it also takes everybody working together on this. My family believes very much in walking the talk on this. This is not just because I was a sustainability manager for 11 years, or because I work for MU Extension talking about renewable energy and energy efficiency in our homes and in our farms, but because I have children. I have a 9-year-old and an 11-year-old, and it's about their future. So personally, how we walk the talk: we live in a home without air conditioning, without central air conditioning. We put in mini split systems when I was pregnant with my son in the summer of 2012, and it was 100 degrees in July and August. But otherwise, we do with passive solar. So to keep out solar heat gain, we put down our blackout shades. We have deciduous trees that help shade in the summer and then lose their leaves in the winter, so that then we can have that passive solar heat gain. We also think about transportation emissions. So our transportation emissions, we walk or ride our bikes for most of our short travel trips that we do. We combine our trips together. So when the kids go to school, we're going up together, and then from there, my husband goes to work or I go to the store. Things that we do together, we all think about our food and how we live this life. Oh, thank you.
Next is Tanya.
All right. Okay. So I'm going to pin Kayla real quick. And my name is Tanya Heath. And some of the things that we have done in our house is that we have used the city programs to get new windows to increase our circulation, through opening the windows during the fall and winter. We've also had new shades, new water heater, newer kitchen appliances, new washer and dryer that are all geared to be energy efficient. I've carpooled as much as possible when we took our daughter to play soccer in town as well as out of state. And I've had an Apple 6 phone up until recently. Last week is recent. And then I have a 12-year-old laptop computer. I turn the lights out. I run stuff at night, the washing machine and dishwasher at night to cut down on electricity. I go the speed limit and I keep my car tuned up. But, we can all do more. And I think one of the things is having more thought leaders in neighborhoods that can influence everyone.
Maria? You're muted.
I know, I get it. I got it. It tells me. I'm Maria Oropalo. It's Italian, Oropalo, okay? I own 2 homes in Columbia. I came to Columbia in 2005. Since I was purchasing an older home in an established neighborhood, I asked for an energy audit. I was delighted that Columbia had this option for us. Followed all the recommendations, increased attic insulation, double pane windows, and we replaced all our doors inside and out. In my primary home, when heavy rains, there's water in our basement. For years, we've moved form over function plantings that were against the house to ameliorate infiltration of our 1970s foundation. We increased gutter and spouts, and we installed rain barrels. The natural stormwater creek that runs behind our neighborhood got filled in so people could have bigger backyards, but what it did is it flooded all of our backyards during heavy rains. So we built a dry creek that included a rain garden and helped the water move along. In 2012, we built a storage shed high enough to have a sight line straight over our neighbor's 80-foot trees, and we have 8 solar panels on that. We added mini splits wherever we could. And in 2015, we did a second home and did the same energy audit. And finally, last summer, our entire lot was regraded using green infrastructure principles that created swales, used soil and plants to reduce free-flowing runoff and directing it to our gardens. Done.
Janice, you're up next for asking a question.
I'm sorry, I lost my questions. I thought I was question number 5.
You have 2 questions, 2 and
Oh.
5.
All right. I'm sorry. Just one moment.
Would you like me to read that question?
Yes, could you please? I'm sorry, Mark.
Not a problem. Question number 2, the City Council adopted the Climate Action and Adaptation Plan, the CAP, in June of 2019 as a response to the climate crisis. Are you familiar with the CAP, and do you generally support its implementation? What are your ideas for moving implementation forward more rapidly? What do you view as the top priorities for near-term implementation? And you have 3 minutes to answer this question, starting, as I said a moment ago, I'm sorry, I'm the one slowing things
It's me.
down. Who starts first?
Barbara
Okay,
Buffalo.
Barbara.
Go
Yep.
ahead, Barbara.
Yes.
Please.
Okay, well, I'm sorry, guys, but yeah, I'm very familiar with the Climate Action and Adaptation Plan, having been the project manager for its development as my role as sustainability manager at the City of Columbia. So I'm very supportive of its implementation. And in fact, I'd call attention to the beginning part of the plan where we talk about cross-cutting strategies. Because as the task force, the community members involved, and the staff involved, it was very important that for this really meaningful plan, that it not be one of the plans that historically sits on the shelf of city offices. So we created an implementation strategies for the plan. And in here, you have 3 main implementation. It's about establishing climate action as a priority of the City Council and the community. And to do that, that's to include climate action plans and strategies into how we implement and measure items within the City of Columbia. The second was to establish CAP goals as priorities in the activities of the city as an organization. And so with that, that was to think about all the city departments, from planning to public works, to our utilities, to our parks, to think about how are they incorporating the climate action goals, both building up our resilience as well as reducing greenhouse gas emissions into how they operate. And one of the biggest ways to do this, which I'm happy to see the Climate and Environment Commission is still pushing on, is for incorporating the CAP into the budget process. The budget is our moral document for how we show our impact for what our community and our organization of the City of Columbia cares about. And so to take climate action and our resilience seriously, you have to see it in the budget process. And then the third big part of the implementation of the Climate Action Plan is to help build up that community support. We heard all throughout the planning of the document was this idea about education and outreach and the need for that within the community. And we all need to own that. And within that, one of my favorite pieces on this is the supporting for equitable climate action. And this has the ideas of thinking about how can you work within our neighborhoods to help have ambassadors and leadership within our community so that this is not just a have and a have not situation and implementation, but how do we do that, as well as earlier in the document, we talk about our equitable actions and how do we evaluate the things that the city is proposing that we do so that we're not implementing anything that's going to help cause any sort of, I guess, additional stressors on our frontline communities, those that have already been proven to be resilient because they've managed to deal with some of the instances that have happened, not just in Columbia, but in other communities as well. So I hope that we continue to see the implementation. I'm happy that they replaced me at the city because that was a good idea, not to just have this go away with one person. And so I look forward to working together with our staff and our city manager when I set my own timer. Yep, I got it. Thank you.
Maria, it's your turn next.
Okay, your question was, have I read it and studied it? No, yes, I have. And do I support implementation? Absolutely. For engagement, I would want a rapid adoption of some of the recommendations. I think many of them are doable now. Council has the ability to adopt cross-cutting strategies, as Barbara mentioned, and the plan is that City Council needs to make it a priority as well as make it a staff priority. Second, Council could enhance the commission work by meeting regularly with them, increasing awareness and education on the issues, ensure the commission has the resources it needs to move forward, because this is how we get the community behind it. They listen to and give credence to what's happening on our boards and commissions. Initially, I would love to schedule a full work session with Council and the Climate Action Commission so that they can prioritize those actions. And again, as Barbara said, it doesn't become another plan on the shelf. Ensure climate impact assessment that was budgeted this year, that it gets done. Get professional training for city staff and council to view projects, designs, and plannings through the lens of the action plan. As subtext, the council can also recommend that action plan become part of employee reviews. Consider that. Change the renewable energy ordinance so that it reflects the CAP goals and not simply based it on renewable energy. Commission a professional audit to analyze the effectiveness and the cost efficiency of the water and light conservation programs. This was supposed to have gotten done and it didn't. Add policies for carbon sequestration by Parks and Rec and stormwater management via tree plantings, land management, and native plantings on public and private lands. There have been other measures as identified in the Climate Commission. We had a very close call last summer that almost inundated a vital substation. A flood analysis is needed, and that's been on my mind since then. Plan for the future that includes ordinances that always reflect climate change. Thank you.
All right, thank you. And I made a mistake and skipped over Tanya. I apologize, Tanya. It's your turn now. But you're muted.
All right, I'm unmuting myself. Okay, I'm gonna do what Barbara did and set my timer. So, all right. So I was thinking about the communication aspect of it. And I believe that, we definitely need to do all that we can that is realistic. I would like to dig in deeper and talk to both sides so that we can listen and find a positive path with all the knowledge. And the reason I say that is because I had a family in Texas last year that suffered through not having electricity when everything got cold because they didn't have the right generators, and the green plans that they had done didn't work out exactly the way that they thought. And unfortunately, they didn't do a test run to see how things happen. They did we've done it, and now, a real disaster happened. And so I as mayor, I would definitely want to listen to all sides. And that doesn't mean that I'm not trying to do the best towards moving in a green direction. It just means that I'm a person that has benefited from the person in the room that's like, that's not going to work, because then I work really hard to make sure that that is taken into account, and then things are able to work rather than ignoring that person. I also think that we have to consider young people. There are 20% of teens who are depressed. Of those, 30% are treated, which means 70% are not. And if we are trying to get people to participate, you think about all the young people that live here, as well as the young people who go to school here. And if they are depressed, they are not going to be listening and engaging the way that they would if they were thinking that what they are going to do is going to have a positive impact, because they're in a survival stage. So I would definitely change the messaging to make sure that people do not feel as though they are shamed, or they feel that they are that the world is going to end in 2035, because that adds to their anxiety and their depression, and then they're not able to move forward with what they can do. Now, another aspect that we do have in our favor is that we have so many young people that go to college here, and we can educate those people about how to talk to their future business employer, and how to look at things so that when they are starting their own business, they are coming at it from a green perspective. So that's what I would do. Thank you.
Thank you. And David, your turn.
Make sure I'm unmuted. Sorry. Yeah, so appreciate you, Mark. I think the city of Columbia should be a regional leader on climate change, climate justice. We have a pretty progressive community, major research university, proximity to local agriculture, strong regional connections, but we also have a history of deep social and racial inequities and inequalities. So I support Columbia having a framework for reducing greenhouse gas emissions, building climate resilience, and working toward climate justice locally. And I do appreciate the emphasis on equity in the CAAP, although the word justice only doesn't appear in the report. Racism only once, and race not at all. So I think we need to be very clear-eyed about the nature of the challenges that we actually face. And I've stated a number of times in this campaign that I'm here to be a strong and uncompromising voice for our most vulnerable neighbors. Columbia doesn't work for everyone at the moment, and we need to do a better job for the future. And the way we handle that climate crisis is going to be a big part of that. So I think the CAAP actually pulls its punches in two key ways. The overall goal of net zero by 2060 target is out of step with scientists. It's out of step with other cities, out of step with the current administration, virtually everyone except for Saudi Arabia. At the latest, our community net zero target should be 2050, and that's at the latest. Other cities are already pushing further. A lot of them are sitting at 2040. And if we're going to lead, then we need to lead from the front and begin to adjust those targets. I also think that the everything against the wall approach that we've taken, putting things like enhancing affordable housing and revising the development code on par with making sure that city staff turn off the lights in housing, and that they are conducting waste composition studies, it muddies the water there. Administrative tasks, and they don't really mix with legislative tasks. So those pet projects kind of sit alongside transformation of projects. It muddies the water. It jeopardizes the political will needed to do big and difficult things, the structural stuff that needs to change, that's going to have deep impacts. So there's a lot of things that we can't control from the outside, right? So we can't control gas prices rising because Russia is invading Ukraine, but we can do a lot of things here. And that's where that bold leadership is going to come into play. So the CAAP should be the starting point. And some of the things that we can actually take action on now are well within our municipal government's purview, like electrifying our vehicle fleet, ensuring electrification and energy efficiency on municipal buildings, transitioning Columbia Water and Light to 100% renewables. Those are the things we can begin to do ourselves. And that's what we should be still focused on.
All right, Carolyn, I think
Okay.
you're up for the next, ask the next question.
Yes, I'm ready. So question number 3. As you likely know, the consultant Siemens, in their report for the Integrated Electric Resource and Master Plan, laid out scenarios to take Columbia Water and Light to 100% renewably generated power by either 2030, 2040, or 2050. Only the former, however, would allow us to meet the United Nations Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change and United States goals of reducing our carbon footprint by half by 2030. Would you support this target date? If not, do you see another path to achieving the needed emissions reductions? There's 1.5 minutes for this response, and Tanya, you go first.
That in reality, if we're doing a full court press to get as close to what we can do by 2030, which is the date you said we need to achieve so that we can keep our numbers where they should be, we need to look at who is doing the most carbon emissions. And is that private businesses in the area? Is it our own city? Do we have outdated equipment? Is it a certain demographic of house and stuff, like the old houses versus the new houses versus the size of the houses, all this sort of stuff? And so what I think we need to do is I think we need to have a realistic evaluation as far as where the whole thing is coming from as far as the most emissions. And then we need to work with those people or those companies as soon as possible so that we can get the best outcome the quickest. And like I said before, we need to use a positive direction because, you know, realistically, everybody is going to want to do their part, but the way to do it is not to shame anybody. The way to do it is to ask them to be part of the solution and to find ways and policies that it would help their business.
Right. Next questions to be asked by Jan.
No, we need the rest to answer that one. It's Maria's.
I'm so sorry.
Right, we've got 3 other people to answer.
Okay, you're ready.
Thank you. The IPCC goal of reducing our emissions by 50% by 2030 is an important one, and we need to do everything we can to attain that. We can be a leader in this field. Unless you can prove to me, however, that we can reach that goal without extracting ourselves from our coal contracts, I'm going to be an accountant here and say that buying more renewable energy won't be the answer to getting us there. Our utility is obligated to buy lots of electricity powered by coal. Some of that comes from contracts signed 40 years ago. They are life of the plant contracts. The latest contract was signed only within the past 10 years. So now we need to undo all that and get out of these contracts. And yes, I would do everything I could to press us to find that release points. I attend the Water and Light Advisory Board meetings for the past 2 years. I believe the board, utility, and staff are working to reach stated goals that are within their power. But notwithstanding all the new ideas generated and research being done on battery storage, increasing homeowners' ability to add solar, without getting out of coal, I don't know that we'll effectively reduce our emissions, no matter how much renewable energy we buy. So I think our first order of business is to get out of those coal contracts.
David, your turn next.
Keep having to unmute myself. So the short answer for me is yes, I would be agreeable to amending the Renewable Energy Ordinance to require Columbia Water and Light to generate or purchase 100% renewable energy by 2030. The long answer is yes, and it's important that we transition to renewables, significantly raising utility rates on our vulnerable neighbors and equitably burdening those households that will experience the negative impacts of climate change sooner and more acutely. We're going to face that potential challenge, whether our target is 2030, 2035, 2040, whatever it is. And while we can't avoid the conversation, we are lucky that we own our own utility and are able to draw on tactics other communities are using to navigate the same space to ensure a just energy transition. We have options, and while I want to know in detail what the costs are projected to be, including those associated with modifying CWL's coal contracts, as Maria mentioned, I'm confident we can balance them. But the city needs to plan now. Our community won't be able to turn around in 2028 when the current renewable ordinance mandates that CWO reaches 30% renewables and say, hey, we need to be 100% in the next 2 years. By then, it is too late. So we need to focus on what opportunities we can seize on once we commit to this more aggressive goal. What can we jumpstart? Partnering with public or private landowners for solar installations or rooftop rentals? How can Boone County and CPS help? Got the stop sign.
Thank you, David. Barbara, it's your turn next.
Yes, thank you. So I'm a yes and person. So for this, yes. And it's because we need to have those goals to know what it is we need to plan for. Columbia Water and Light has historically had these goals set up, but staff has not had that leadership from the top up that's been pushing them to have that plan for how they're going to get to these renewable energy goals. And 2020 was the first year when we started to transition the climate action and, the renewable energy report to be listed more as a plan rather than a report. Because the question the city council and the community are asking the water and light utility is, how are you going to get there? How are you going to meet the goal? And if you read today's report and then Columbia Missourian, Columbia Water and Light did not meet the renewable energy goal, even that had been set out there. And in part of that's the market fluctuation and the projects not coming on soon enough. So I think it's up to the mayor, and I know I'll be the side of mayor, who will ask, what are we doing? And routinely checking in to say, council or Columbia Water and Light, how are you meeting your goals for this? And I'd also like to point out in the integrated resource plan, a key feature of this is supposed to be, what are we doing for demand side management? Because before we can add on more renewable energy onto our grid, we need to think about what are the programs in place that help people save energy in their homes. What can we do for enhancing home performance with Energy Star in our rental housing? What can we do for those homes that need to reduce now? And how are we going to get there?
Thank you, Barbara. Our next question is going to be asked now by Jan.
Thanks, Mark. Okay, let's see. Question number 4. Transportation accounts for a significant portion of our carbon footprint. The provision of easily accessible, affordable, and convenient public transit is also a matter of social equity. What policies would you suggest to increase the use of public transit, walking and cycling, reduce the use of fossil fuels, and promote the transition to electric vehicles? And you'll have 3 minutes each to answer this question. And the first person to go will be Maria Oropolo. I hope I said that right this time.
We'll get there, Jan, don't worry.
Sorry.
That's okay. It's okay. I get it. Since my foundational experience in Columbia has been through the finance and the audit, the high level look of transit gives me pause. As long as transit falls under public works, which is a service, and the airport falls under economic development, that tells us everything we need to know about how the city has prioritized transit. It hasn't. And that starts at the city council level. Further, we've reduced staff in transit. In FY22, the transit superintendent position was eliminated and replaced by 2 public works people. Again, the impetus behind encouraging, growing a sustainable, robust transit system is not given a priority and is actually being put further down on our list. So first, I would challenge council members to determine exactly where transit priorities should be. Second, while our city has never been able to make that partnership with the educational institutions to provide a robust transit system that benefits residents, students, and staff, it is attainable. I would champion another attempt to have this conversation because in many college towns across the country, transit is the way to go. Many people put their cars aside. Third, the electric buses are hard to get, expensive, and challenges staff to do things differently. That's the way we've always done it. Doesn't work here anymore. Recent council discussions on purchasing a replacement fleet of electric buses were pebbled with problems, not solutions. Council should be clear that it wants to hear the solutions. 4, as our new large companies settled into town, a workforce is what we've promised them. So let's take that seriously and make an ancillary promise of a reliable citywide robust transit plan. I'm a city person. I love cities. Columbia is no longer a little town that it was. It needs to connect north, south, east, west, northwest, southeast. It has to connect that way. We need a better plan. I want to mention that I love the transportation infrastructure scorecard because it reads exactly like the comprehensive plan that was developed for the visioning process, and it had a low priority at that time. Let's move that upwards. Thank you.
Thank you. And David, it's your turn.
Yeah, so there are a couple questions that guide my views on transportation, and they are what serves the people of Columbia best and ensures folks that don't have cars, who have disabilities, are seniors, who are low income. How do we ensure they aren't isolated by the lack of access to transportation? And what can the city do with state and federal infrastructure and transportation dollars now and in the future to improve transportation for all of us within our existing car-centric development pattern? What investments can we make? Columbia does have a great recreational trail system, and I look forward to the plans from Parks and Recreation to expand the system within the renewed park sales tax we passed in November, especially north of I-70. But if our trail system and connected bike lanes are going to be used more intensively for commuting, they have to be welcome to everyone. That means people who tend to look like me. We have to feel safe on those trails and feel ownership over them as well. We also need to think about the complete trip and how our cycling infrastructure connects or really doesn't connect to most of our major destinations, as Maria talked. That connectivity is important for pedestrians too. Walking is really the backbone of urban transit. We should prioritize safe and complete sidewalks. There are many streets in Columbia where there are either no sidewalks or truly terrifying sidewalks that really don't buffer pedestrians from traffic going at about 35 to 50 miles an hour. No one wants to walk down those sidewalks. Again, we need to think about those complete trips. If the last 1/4 mile is teetering along the shoulder, you aren't inclined to go back to do it again, right? So for walking and biking, I want to make sure that the city is listening to users of specific roads and crosswalks, pathways and trails. What do you need to get to Aldi's or GURBS safely? What do you need to be able to walk your first grader home from Parkade? What do you need to be able to go to Cosmo Park? These are important questions. And the bus has to come when you make it to your bus stop, right? So our public transit system needs to serve current riders, it needs to grow ridership and be dependable over the long term as Columbia continues to grow. So I'm interested in reviving the possibility of a GoComo partnership with MU and perhaps other major employers, putting those stops just outside those, not down the street, so folks aren't having to walk an extra block or two to get to work. I'm supportive of purchasing electric buses as part of transitioning the city fleet to EVs and to limit health effects of emissions on drivers, riders, and mechanics. But you also have to transition to a greener government. It's just about the tech. It's about the people who build, drive it, and maintain it. We need to ensure that those mechanics who are going to be working on those electric buses and that electric vehicle fleet have the training to be able to do so. I also want to add charging stations to our parking garages downtown and other public buildings.
Thank you, David. Barbara, your turn.
Thank you, Mark. Yeah, so transportation accounts for 27% of our community's greenhouse gas emissions. And so when we think about reducing those greenhouse gas emissions, part of it is going to be how we travel, but also how we build. So within the city of Columbia, when you talk about trying to get, from home to work or from, school to home, you have to think about where it is that we're building our housing, where it is we're building our businesses, and how we're connecting the two together. So for me, I think about when I'm thinking of the future of Columbia, I'm thinking about how are we incentivizing infill development to maintain and take advantage of some of our existing infrastructure, where we have sidewalks, where we have roads, where we have trails. How can we also incentivize having more transit-oriented development? So as we're thinking about going down Providence, for my children in the future, when they're here, I like to imagine multi-housing with like first floor retail along Providence with maybe apartments up above. Selfishly, I would like to live in one of those so that then I could just walk everywhere I was going. Hopefully that I'm still mobile. But when I think about this is the future we want. Because then when you have that sort of support and density of people who are needing transportation, you have the additional ridership that we need to meet our mode share goals that we have in the climate action plan. And with that, there's that piece of, we could then support a bus system that's going more frequently and going longer. But before you can get to there, we obviously need the workforce to do that. And so with the workforce there, it's making sure that you have the people that can ride the bus, that drive the bus, and take care of the bus. But besides transit, which is a huge piece, and it's a huge part of where we want to do our mode share goals, we also want to think about the sidewalks and the trails, and that we have a safe space for if kids are going to be riding on our streets to get to school. And so with those, I think about how we prioritize, for instance, completing our sidewalk master plan. When I talked earlier about a plan on a shelf, that's one of the plans that's on the shelf. We have a sidewalk master plan that's talking about connecting and finishing some of the sidewalks throughout the city of Columbia. And when I look at that, and I think about some of the funds that we have coming in for the city of Columbia, connecting people so that they can get safely for where their destination is going to be key for achieving our Vision Zero goal, where no death is acceptable in traffic fatalities. And when I think about our workforce, I'm also thinking about how can we partner with some of our big employers, for instance, out on Route B, when I think about Aurora Dairy or 3M. If we think about some of those examples that other communities do, which is kind of the backbone of sustainability, is just to blatantly steal some really great ideas like college towns do from other places. And one of those is to partner with some of those organizations so that we can have ride share programs or the end of mile put together. So if we have a bus system that goes somewhere, maybe we could have carpool, like commuter lots where people can carpool together, working with those businesses to help finish that mile road. Thank you.
Thank you. Tanya, your turn.
All right, thank you. So this is what I'm thinking. In order to reduce Columbia's carbon footprint, we need more people taking public transit and less people driving their own cars. This can only be done by showing our citizens that public transit is easy to do. However, right now, people do not think it is easy to do, or perhaps even safe, or that it even makes sense. So what I would do is I would figure out why we're stuck. Because I know I've heard people that will say they get on the bus an hour or two before they start work compared to a 20-minute private car ride. Who wants to do that? Whether you're in a situation where you don't have a car, that's not fun. If you do have a car, you're not going to give up your car to take a 1 to 2 hour, bus ride all over the city to get to where you want to go, just to, make the emissions better in Columbia for an everyday occurrence. So we need to figure out how to do the bus system a lot better. And then we need to talk about how that it's safe, clean, and efficient. We could launch a campaign about that to create awareness about this option and illustrate that to all the new college students that come into town. I would also encourage drivers of electric vehicles to talk to their neighbors about how that whole new idea is working on a practical level in their house, and not in their house, but when they plug it in at night and things like that, or they plug it in to various parts of the city. I would also have charging stations I would encourage businesses to put charging stations in, like Hy-Vee has recently put in charging stations, and that's helped encourage that. Another thing I would do is, and I realize that the electric cars are very expensive, but over time, 10 or 15 years from now, that hopefully the cost will come down. Another thing is that I would do a campaign to encourage college students to use their bike or to walk. I would also talk to the colleges and MU about not having college students use their car for the first 2 years because they are living in dorms. I myself didn't get a car until I was a senior, and I had a great experience at Mizzou. Having less cars with the freshmen and sophomores, that would help them get in the habit of walking and biking. And then by the time they're juniors and seniors, they're already going to be in the habit of doing that. And so they may just use their cars to go home on the weekend or for a holiday. We can also use good habits of walking for the rest of us to stay in shape. Thank you.
Thank you, Tanya. Next question, number 5, Janice, your turn.
As Columbia grows in size and population, it becomes increasingly important to plan along with Boone County for development and land use management. Land use management is important for both adaptation to and mitigation of climate change impacts. Columbia has East Area and Northeast Area plans, but no plans for the West, South, or Northern areas. Do you support developing area plans for these areas? How can Columbia be more proactive instead of reactive in matters of planning and annexation? You have a minute and a half, and I believe David goes first.
Thank you. So as a current CPS, I think I bring a pretty unique perspective to collaborative area planning. CPS already has boundary areas extending far beyond the current Columbia city limits, and the district has plans has planned for long-term changes in attendance and need for new schools. So I'm giving an example. Battle High School is one of the key anchors for the east and northeast portions of the city. And at the moment, there isn't very much built out there. It's almost a small food desert. So Columbia is going to continue to grow, whether that is out or with denser population centers within our current city limits, because it's a pretty desirable place to live. That growth is either going to be directed by public and elected officials in the city, county, and school district, or it's going to be directed by private developers. And I would prefer the prior approach. If a 120 home subdivision is built off of Route UU, CPS is going to have to get those kids to school, no matter who designed it. So we can't strand folks from services. And I don't just mean services like utilities, I mean neighborhood schools, grocery stores, police and firefighters, transit stops, parks and trails, childcare, healthcare, and community centers. We also have to avoid exposing folks to known climate risks like flooding, which is an acute concern in the western part of our city. So ultimately, to some degree of planning needs to help us work together to make sure our region is livable for everyone while protecting local independent agriculture, recreational conservation areas.
Thank you. Barbara, your turn next. Did I get that right? Yes.
Yeah, I pulled a Jan die. I lost my mouse. Sorry. So yes, we obviously need the plans to be in place. And I will point out that the city and the county actually have been working on a West Area development plan. They began, I believe it was February 2020. Probably didn't know it was going to be paused for a while, but they had come together for the idea of putting together the West Area development plan. And overall, I'm in favor of development plans. They help us to show guidance for where our intentional growth can be. And I use that word intentionally, because I think we have the opportunity to think about how the community grows. And so as you're planning and you're working with your partners, like the school district, the county utility providers, with our city and county utilities and staff, and our community stakeholders, we can obviously talk about these growth trends and our infrastructure needs that we're going to see, and think about where we have opportunities for improvement from the last time when we tried this. So the current size of the plan's boundaries that they have together is similar to the size of the East Columbia Area Plan, and it's much larger than the Northeast Columbia Area Plan. So I have this big concern. I don't want it to get too large because I think that means it becomes too large and complex for in detail, where we don't have the opportunity to pivot when we have new opportunities. But the one thing I'd point out in all of these plans is that there's been hesitance, like in the past, to include long-term planning for including residential zoning and commercial districts, including small-scale manufacturing. And they do talk about schools to some extent, there's my timer, and thinking about mixed density housing. So we need to do that. I'm done.
Thank you. Tanya, you're up next.
All right, okay. So I would say that I'm in favor of further developing Columbia in an environmentally conscious way. This means approving building plans that are carbon neutral and beautiful additions to our great city. The more we build sustainably, the more we can become a beacon of hope for positive climate action going forward. We also need to look at sinkholes and other geological concerns as far as whether we build west, east, or north. And those are things that, you know, you've seen it in other states. And I mean, recently Pennsylvania, I believe, had a whole bridge that collapsed because of erosion. So I think we really need to look at how, you know, where the rivers are flowing and where things are going on, not the rivers, but the streams and the geological aspects of things to decide where we're going to move our new neighborhoods. And then we also need to think about, you know, are sidewalks good or are they bad? And how that also interacts with the water flow. Maybe we just do sidewalks on one side of the road. So we just need to be conscious about what it is that we're doing. And we need to, again, take all points of view so that we can make the best decisions and listen to the people that might disagree with us.
Thank you, Tanya. Maria, you're last on this one.
I'm going to talk as fast as I can because I've got too much to cover. Since October 2021, when I decided to think about running for office, I had been drawing attention to the fast development happening just south of Columbia. Only recently, news stories of Amazon warehouse have become known. This was one of the three that I identified happening there. Sewer capacity for me remains a concern. There are challenges to the capacity of Little Bonfen and the Gans Creek Basin areas. Pumping sewer from one basin to another adversely affects the availability of the sewer. Boone County Regional Sewer District South K facility is generally at capacity now. To continue to grow on the south side, there needs to be improvements to a regional pump system or a separate treatment facilities. Jumping ahead, missing a lot of stuff. Development to the south and to the west, internal studies of the city have shown is going to come at a high cost to all parties. Policies that encourage development in areas that are well served, and it's working well with the East Area Development Plan. The development in the south and west is going to be expensive. By the way, the establishment of the urban services area that deals with annexation and sewer capacity specifically was given a very low priority in the comprehensive plan that was published in 2013. We're working on a new one. We need to raise those to a higher priority so that we can develop these plans effectively. Thank you.
Thank you. Carolyn, I think you're asking the next question.
That's correct. Okay, so the next question actually has two parts, but they both relate to the annexation of additional property into Columbia. The first part is, do you think it would be appropriate to delay any annexation of land bordering Rockbridge Memorial State Park, and more particularly the Gans Creek Wild Area, until the Unified Development Code is amended to include more protective regulations for sensitive areas? Would you be likely to support science-based regulations that would apply to any defined sensitive areas that are annexed into Columbia? And the second part is, more housing is needed in Columbia, and more compact and dense housing is important to reach climate action plan goals. Would you support a process to require or encourage more density where appropriate as new tracts are annexed into Columbia? For example, eliminating R1 zoning or changing it to require more clustering and smaller lot sizes. You have 3 minutes to answer this question, and Barbara Buffalo goes first.
Okay, 3 parts. I got it. I'm gonna start my timer. Okay, so first the discussion was about annexation. And I love the idea of this talk about the Unified Development Code being amended. Because the Unified Development Code, when it was passed, everybody knew, staff and those involved in the development of it, the community members, knew that there was already a list of items that the city and the community members wanted to fix or address. And that list still exists and items keep getting added to it. And so this is one of them. The idea about protective regulations for our sensitive areas was something that was brought up at that time because we were experiencing development in the southern part of the city. And so with that, I would say, yes, and we need to get on that. And I know part of that is that we are having staff that are having to all of a sudden get pulled into other things. The staff that works on updating the Unified Development Code were also the ones recently tasked with doing the short-term rental regulation. They were the ones that did medical marijuana, bird scooters. All of these things continue to keep on adding to staff's efforts. So I'd like to encourage for us to also make sure that we have the staff, or if it means we have to bring in experts in this area to help advise staff on doing this so that we're making sure that we are protecting our beautiful natural wild areas in Columbia. And with that, part B, yes, I obviously support science-based city regulations. I think this is another one too, that we have this idea of as things come across city council's desk and we're approving things. Right now we have a city council memo that has things like, oh, is this addressing by the climate action plan? Or is this in the strategic plan? What's the financial implementation or action on this? But that data doesn't go anywhere. And so as mayor, I want to address and push for us to have science-based city regulations on also how council approves things so that we can see the impact on equity, we can see the impact on our environment, in our economy. And then for the more housing, this is a very big part of my piece and my platform for this, is this idea about middle housing and our infill development. I think it was in 2019, I think it was this fall of 2019, the city brought in Tony Perez to talk about middle housing for our Affordable Housing Summit. And he talked about this design concept where we have to create walkable, affordable housing by creating multifamily structures where the design can blend with our neighboring properties, as well as thinking about how we can have additional people all together so they can take advantage of that existing infrastructure. And so I'm very supportive of changing these things. And I think we can have it be a yes and situation where it's not getting rid of our community character, where it's not overburdening the parking requirements or existing infrastructure that's there, but we're actually working together so that everybody has an opportunity to thrive in the city of Columbia. Thank you.
Thank you. Tanya, you're up next.
All right, thank you. So I would say that, yes, I am in favor of more protective regulations for the sensitive areas. And I'll just say this as a caveat. I know that I say that, but then, you hear about how that they won't let in some part of the country, something get built because, some one little frog is going to be, extinct if they build it there. And so I always think, what in the world? And so I would like to have major discussions where we're like, okay, let's really talk about this. And for sure, Gans Creek and Rockbridge are such important property that, everybody gets to enjoy and things like that. So I think that is reasonable to protect that. I think that there might be other areas that I don't know all the details about right now. And I think that when it's totally reasonable, then I think that makes sense to protect all those areas with reasonable regulations. If there's odd extreme regulations, then I think we have to really look at what we're trying to do to balance both things. But as far as Rockbridge and Gans Creek, I definitely think we need to protect those areas. And I also agree that it is important to have science-based city regulations because then it's easy for people to talk about the same things in a logical way rather than an emotional way. However, I will say that in general, as we have seen during the pandemic, that there's a lot of ways that you can define science. So again, that is a tricky question because we have to have people that agree on which science that we're going to be discussing as quote, the science. So I think logical science is the science that I'm talking about that I would agree to. So that's my answer on that. And then as far as more housing in Columbia and the, how to have more housing and the density issue, the thing I would say about that is, interestingly enough, is that young people actually are looking at smaller houses. If you talk to people in college, they are definitely not as interested in a big house as boomers and as Gen Xers. And I think it's because they have been raised with this environmental focus, the whole time, and they are concerned what's going to happen in their lifetime. So I think smaller houses is going to be a popular trend going forward with young people. Thank you.
Thank you. Maria, your turn next.
Thank you. Yes, of course, I support science-based city regulations to define the sensitive areas of our community. What I do know is that development poses a challenge to traditional approaches to green infrastructure and conservation. One idea that was proposed by Jeff Barrow, who was former chair of planning and zoning, former director of the Greenbelt Land Trust, was an overlay for the whole length of Gans Road. I 100% agree with that. That's something doable and probably one of the most, anyway, a good protection device. Our future land use maps need to be fleshed out. The American Planning Association's Green Community Centers examined how large-scale green infrastructure definition and development definition can be bridged in order to tackle this challenge and help identify areas that share conservation interests across urban-rural continuum. I would hope the planning staff would welcome this type of clarity to how Columbia can grow and protect our beautiful land, identifying conservation priorities, updating development regulation, and providing education and assistance. I support an environmental overlay planning tool that will ensure that the development of land does not affect identified environmental values and qualities of particularly sensitive areas. The next question was about housing. I'm an affordable housing advocate for decades. I worked in it for a long time. Affordable housing starts with compact, dense housing and actually intersects neatly with the climate action goals. Well thought out plans help eliminate food deserts, create ways of relying on a robust transit system. Creating affordable housing produces less reliance on fossil fuel energy. Pocket neighborhoods, which we have an excellent example of on West Ash, green driveways and parking lots, alleyway housing, which are being lauded in Toronto for boldly addressing affordability in a very expensive city, effectively getting two housings on one lot, sharing infrastructure that's already in place. Accessory dwelling units are being built in a Virginia community that actually eliminate R1 zoning. Lots to discuss on that topic. Inclusionary zoning, a much misunderstood idea in Columbia, actually makes way for many types of diverse housing options, creating new types of walkable, human-scaled neighborhoods, offering alternative housing, including adaptive reuse of structurally sound building, creating RSO, tiny houses, etc. Thank you.
Thank you. And David, your turn.
So Rockbridge State Park and Gans Creek are assets to Columbia. We have a responsibility to protect them. I also think that we have a responsibility to future residents and current taxpayers to ensure that we are extending infrastructure efficiently and not investing in building and then trying to service isolated developments. We should be considering how to incentivize denser housing on vacant and underutilized land currently within city limits. With development in or near sensitive areas, the city needs to make sure parties are attentive to both the impact of land clearance and construction on adjacent properties in the watershed, and the long-term impact of use on adjacent properties and the watershed. I will be inclined to support changes to the city code to help protect sensitive areas and mitigate potentially harmful effects of development during construction, and with the use. Most of the sensitive areas defined in Columbia Imagine are south and east of the city limits. And although some of those have already been added to Columbia and developed. Given the characteristics of these areas, science-based regulations would need to account for area geology, hydrology, slopes, elevation, and biology. I know Tanya touched on that frog. When I was in the Marine Corps, if you were on a range out in Yuma, there is a desert turtle that you cannot open fire on. So if a single turtle crosses the range goes cold, because the Marine Corps has determined that we are going to protect this species no matter what, even if it means preventing necessary training. I also support increasing the supply of affordable housing in Columbia. I support infill development that uses or updates existing infrastructure. I'd welcome a conversation about zoning reform, including eliminating current R1 zoning and reducing minimum lot sizes across the city, and not just in newly annexed areas. I think people-centered growth also happens to be pretty climate-friendly growth. Problem with simply encouraging denser and presumably more affordable residential housing on the fringes of the city is what I mentioned previously. We have to ensure that we are not stranding people from their families and other services and reinforcing car dependence, especially amongst our lower income neighbors.
Thank you, David. Before we go to our final question, I should mention that for anyone listening on the radio, you're listening to 89.5 KOPN Columbia Community Radio. That's just a legal ID that has to be said at the top of each hour. Now, going to our last question, Jan, it's your turn to read.
Yes. Okay, this is the seventh and last question. Over half of the housing units in Columbia are rental units. Many of these units have energy efficiency and weatherization issues, and many of the rental unit occupants are energy burdened, meaning they spend too large of a share of their income on utility bills. Would you support implementing a policy of either mandatory energy scoring for rental units, mandatory minimum energy efficiency standards for rental units, or some combination of policies to improve energy efficiency of rental units in Columbia? You'll each have 3 minutes to answer, and Tanya will lead off.
Thank you. So the people of Columbia are my #1 priority. If the people are living in homes where they are safe and happy, that is good. However, if they're living in a place where their income is having to pay for an inefficient, dwelling, then it's limiting for their future savings and things that they can do with the money that should be there for them, because in a normal house there would be upgrades, but when you're talking about rental property, it's up to the landlord to decide what to do on that. So in the old days, there were probably more people in Columbia that owned a lot of the rental property. However, there are people in other states that own rental property here, and that their needs and their desires for Columbia may be zero. And so they may be trying to just get all the money possible out of the whole rental unit and not be excited about making the improvements for their tenants. So I think we have to come up with some sort of solution where we can incentivize the owners of these rental properties to do the things that will help reduce the emissions, but also, make it affordable for their tenants, because we can't have the owners do all these positive increases, things that they should do, but then the cost is given to their tenants. Because I just heard of a homeless lady last week, and her husband was already working 40 to 60 hours, and they have 4 children, and their rent went up by $400, just boom, for no reason. And they were homeless, and she couldn't work because of a health situation. So I think we have to be very conscientious about how we go about doing these positive, forward motion and clean energy ideas for our residents. We also could look at things with the nuclear energy that we have here, and whether that would help with some of the things that we're trying to do, as well as just going through the best practices of other cities that are larger than us and implementing those ideas in Columbia to make it better for everyone moving forward. So thank you.
Thank you, Tanya. Maria, you're up next.
Thank you. First off, yes, I would support either or some combination of energy scoring. Where I got stuck was on the word mandatory. I think that's going to be difficult. I think we need to change that conversation a little bit. And here's how I would do it. The affordability of housing is a key factor in determining whether or not a tenant should sign a lease. And frankly, it should give pause to the landlord as well. In my finance and audit committee work, I am very aware that renters are energy burdened in many parts of Columbia. This is evidenced by our monthly reports, which includes connection fees, reconnection fees, late fees as a revenue stream. We expect to get that money because we know it's happening. So I'm not unaware of the actual cost to our residents. I further believe that we should encourage sharing, down the page, sharing the score with prospective residents, attaching an energy score so people can, when they're looking at apartments, know what it would cost to live in there. I further believe that while it's the 4th or 5th thing a renter's list of question, a heating disclosure may make a difference between calmly signing a lease or panicking. The question hangs on the word mandatory. The reason for the energy scoring or energy efficiency standard is often seen as a burden to the property owner. If we are discussing how to move the community forward on this issue, I think it starts with the cities making big, bold choices first. As the electric grid is growing, the most significant transformation in the history of electricity, as it evolves towards greener, more dependable, and a sustainable future, I support the city pivoting to demand side management. I support smart meters to help address peak demand. Research shows the number of demand response programs are growing across the country and are helping communities meet their goals and help home rentals and homeowners control the cost of utilities from inside their house. I would go further and provide supporting incentives for building owners to upgrade heating and cooling systems, getting rid of electric resistance units, which causes hardships for many families. Finally, I would welcome a robust discussion in updating, how do we update rental units across the city, whether it's a 60-year-old building or a 10-year-old building. These things need to be done, and it needs to have a conversation. Thank you.
Thank you. David, you're next.
So 54% of renters in Columbia are house cost burden. I'm going to say that one more time just for emphasis. 54% of renters in Columbia are housing cost burden. And utility costs are a large contributor to housing insecurity for low-income renters. Folks will stay in costly, substandard, or even dangerous conditions just out of fear of being evicted and losing shelter entirely. People will stay there just to ensure that their kids have somewhere to go at night, and that's unacceptable. So the city of Columbia needs to do more to protect tenants, period. I support introducing the regulations to require energy audits of rental units, weatherization, LED lighting, proper venting for gas ranges, and mold mitigation, and expanding rental enforcement. including with additional staff and more frequent rental inspections. The current inspection rate of every 6 years is pretty ripe for tenant exploitation. But I think most landlords in Columbia want to provide the best service to their tenants, most of them. With clear regulations in place, the city and partner agencies can help landlords meet those requirements with good education, technical assistance, rebates, and incentives as needed. Now, I understand where the enthusiasm for published energy scoring comes from. For example, a landlord may install an electric air furnace that is incredibly inefficient, but it's also a really cheap investment for them because the tenant's paying that large water and light bill. But scoring alone only works for categories of units and that have to compete for renters, like those that cater to students. For others, where the supply of units is severely limited, like those that accept housing choice vouchers and serve low income tenants, scoring will not provide the same incentive. Will not provide the same incentive to improve because renters don't have the option to reject landlords who don't adapt. So we need clarity on our regulations and to make sure that changes proceed equitably.
Thank you. Barbara, your last year.
Yes, thank you. So yeah, rental energy efficiency has been something that's been a part of my life for even before I worked for the city when I was on the Environment Energy Commission, because we knew that we had 52% of our housing stock as renters. And we know of that, the majority they are housing cost burdened, where they're spending over more of their monthly income on the housing cost that includes utilities. The one thing that I know from working for the city for the last 11 years is that it's going to take a true partnership between those who maintain and own property within the city of Columbia, those who use the property, and those who help people to benefit and to get into those homes. Those are like our social service agencies like Love Columbia, who actually help people find housing that will take their housing choice vouchers, as well as help them find properties that are affordable for them to move into. And it's going to take the partnership of our utility. So the City of Columbia for water and light, and also Boone Electric, our partners that do electric through parts of our part of our city, as well as Ameren UE, all offer rebate and incentive programs for helping improve efficiencies. And we know that if we help advertise and get those get increased usage of those programs, then we'll see an increase both for energy efficiency in these properties, as well as a decrease into our demand and our load on the utility structure. So with that, when I was with the city, we took some of our CDBG funds and partnered it with Columbia Water and Light's rebates for Section 8 housing, for looking at an opportunity where we could even just add insulation into the attic, because we know that that makes such a big difference in helping reduce utility bills. And we saw an increase in that. So I think we have something like 1,600 of homes, rental housing units in the city of Columbia have done the home efficiency score. One of the things that I really love about this, and so small correction, so rental units are inspected every 3 years, unless they can request an extension for an additional 3 years if there's been no complaints or issues with that. So I think there's that raising awareness on the fact that if a utility or if a tenant is having an issue, what are their opportunities for giving feedback so that they know that then the housing unit can be inspected. But with that, there's also the additional education that needs to be awareness for how to take advantage of some of these programs and how to advocate on behalf of yourself for it. When we were working at other cities for what they've done, we have an opportunity right now with the rescue plan funds coming down to our community, where we could use part of those funds as the carrot needed. Because what most businesses want is consistency and clarity and understanding what's going to happen. So if we know that, let's say in 10 years, home efficiency scores are going to be required as part of the rental inspection to go across, then right now we could use some of those stimulus funds to make physical improvements in our housing stock so that we are helping people reduce their utility rates, and thus before we get to the stick of requirement. So thank you.
All righty. Well, I want to thank all 4 of you candidates for making yourselves available to Columbia citizens for this evening's event, and I wish you all good luck in the campaign. On behalf of the 5 co-sponsoring organizations, Citizens Climate Lobby of Columbia, Climate Leaders at Mizzou, Mid-Missouri Peace Works, Osage Group, Sierra Club, and Renew Missouri. We thank you for what you're doing. We thank all of the participants who came to the forum via Zoom and those who listened via our Facebook Live or our KOPN broadcast. I will mention that next Tuesday, the 1st of March, we will have all 4 candidates running for the 2 ward seats that are available this year, the 3rd ward and the 4th ward. That will start at 7 p.m. If one is working through the Zoom link, there's a different Zoom link for next Tuesday. So go back to the event and get that one. Don't try to use the one you used tonight, or you find yourself in a already happened forum, not the one that's coming up. I again thank everyone. Special thanks to my friend Carolyn, who helped make this event happen tonight, and to all the other people who volunteered their time and effort in this. Wish you all a good night, and be well and stay warm.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thanks.
Bye all.